Welcome to the Power of Nature podcast. I'm your host, Michelle Waldo. In this show, I talk about how connecting with nature and the natural world can create amazing and immeasurable benefits for us and in our lives. I share stories of my experiences doing this as part of a regular and ongoing practice, and I talk to others about their experiences with the power of nature as well. So join me as we go on a journey of learning about the power of nature and the impact that it can have on our own lives. Welcome back to the Power of Nature podcast. Today, I want to talk about where we go in nature, or the way we connect with nature doesn't have to be kind of like the best way, the best place, a big deal, a big thing. As a matter of fact, what I've found is that when I do that, it doesn't often lead to the kinds of experiences that I have when I just connect with nature and the natural world kind of as a regular practice and as kind of in letting whatever it is unfold. So let's dive into this. This topic came to me because I was eating lunch, and I've been thinking a lot lately about, and kind of becoming aware of how I am choosing to spend my time, even in moments like when I just have maybe 15 minutes while I'm eating. Am I going to, listen to something that may not really feel that good and doesn't feel very good time and time again? Or am I going to kind of set the direction of my own desire and intention and use my time based on what works for me? And in the spirit of that thinking, I, had this little bit of time. I had this kind of light lunch that I wanted to eat. It was some hummus and some vegetables, and I felt good about it. And my first inclination was to put on a TV show. But that just because our kitchen is in our living room, and, I kind of had this time to kill and whatever. But I decided to either just sit, or there was a magazine, a tourist magazine. We live here in Montana, really close to Glacier National Park, which is an amazingly, stunningly underline, exclamation point place in Montana. If you like mountains and natural beauty and the wild, it is here in spades, and it is gorgeous, and we live close to it. And the magazine that I was looking at was one of those free tourist magazines that, had a picture from Glacier National Park on the front. And, the picture just kind of felt good. And I thought, I'll just sit and just flip through this and just enjoy seeing some photos of Glacier National Park. And as I was flipping through the magazine, there were all these different articles about different things to do, and in Glacier National Park, and in also some of the other really amazing attractions that we have in nature here in this area that I live in. We have some amazing lakes out even outside of Glacier National Park. We have just a lot of cool things. There's the Bob Marshall Wilderness. A lot of people love going into. There's, just hiking, fishing. I mean, there's just a lot. And as I was flipping through the pages of this magazine and looking at some of the things that they were talking about, I was thinking, wow, I haven't really been doing those things. And I actually haven't even gone to Glacier National Park that many times. I think I've been 2 times, 3 times since we moved here. And we moved here 3 years ago. So over 3 years, I haven't gone that many times. And what's crazy is when we first came here, and then when we were thinking of moving here, I really felt like this was the draw. Like, wow, we would be so close to this amazing place that I saw photos of and pictures of. And I was like, those mountains are amazing. And I'm just going to hang out there all the time. And I'm just going to the park all the time. And this is what I'm going to do all the time. And I thought that I would, and here I am sitting looking at this magazine and looking at these pictures and thinking, why haven't I? Why haven't I gone in the more, into Glacier National Park more? Why haven't I done some of these other things more? And I would like to, I would like to. But I think the thing that I came to as my awareness is something that I think is really helpful. It's been helpful for me, and it might be helpful for you to think about too. And that is, sometimes I get caught up in, to go to Glacier National Park during the peak season. There's a lot of other people there. There's just, it's always like you want to make sure you have everything and you pack everything up. And, it kind of reminds me of when I used to go camping when I lived in California. It was like I loved going camping, but the process of getting ready to go camping literally almost killed me. And I would try to just shut down what that was like, what that experience was like of having to make sure we thought through everything and we suddenly got everything. And we have certain dietary needs that mean that even on the road, we had to pack food, or it's not easy for us to just go to a grocery store and get the kind of stuff that works for us. If we're out in the middle of nowhere, there's only certain grocery stores that carry stuff and all of that. So there's a lot of pressure and planning and stuff that we've had, felt like we needed to do to be able to have that experience. And it's almost like once that was all done, I was so exhausted and depleted by all of that and then you're there and you you want to go on this trail and that trail, so you see these things and whatever, and I don't know, my body is just tensing up even as I'm talking about it, because it's almost like all this pressure, all this need, all this feeling of, if I don't do it this way, I might miss out, or I've got to get my fill of nature while I can, or I've got to make sure I see everything I can. And it's a direct contrast to what I've been talking about in this podcast to date. Because I find that when the kinds of benefits that I've talked about in this podcast happen, they happen when I'm not doing any of that other stuff, trying to make everything perfect, trying to get into the perfect spot in nature, trying to make sure I'm all packed up, doing all kinds of planning, figuring out what our trail is going to be, and we're going to go on this walk, or can we bring the dog, or can we not, or how are the kids going to be, and do we have the right food, and what if it starts to rain, do we have the right gear? I mean, that is not what leads to the moments in which I have experienced kind of like nature being this amazing conduit of just experiencing a sense of peace, a sense of whatever it is really that I'm kind of at the deeper level of me truly wanting at that moment. If I'm stressed out, feeling a sense of relaxation and peace. If I'm unsure, just kind of like relaxing, and then clarity comes. If I'm sad, and all of that, being able to cry. It's like those kinds of experiences where nature helps me experience things that truly help impact my life in what I would call self-empowering ways. It doesn't come from all that planning and getting everything perfect. It comes from just going out and connecting with nature. And so, for me, I've talked about, I go out to this place on our property, and I think it's beautiful. I find such beauty in this spot. But would everybody else see that beauty? I don't know. I don't know that they would, and I don't need them to, and nor do they need to. What resonates with me and what resonates with somebody else in nature don't have to be the same, and they may all be different, and they often are. And I think really it's about letting yourself just explore what it is you like, and then letting yourself go there without needing it to be some big thing, or needing it to go to like the perfect place in nature or have the perfect experience. When we kind of drop the oars of what we require or are asking nature to give us, I find that nature always delivers not only what we originally kind of want at the deepest level of our hearts and our souls, but so much more. I mean, I can't say how many times when it's like I get what I truly wanted, that sometimes I wasn't even maybe aware of what I truly wanted, and then I get much more than that. And it comes from a few things. It comes from allowing myself to do this as a regular practice, which I've talked about, something that I choose repeatedly. But it also comes from letting myself find that kind of, what's the word? It's almost like it's an allowing of letting the magic of nature show itself to me in whatever way, by being open to it. And to get to that state, I have to let go of needing things to be a certain way, or to be in a certain place, or to be perfect. And so, for me, it's about just randomly going out in a spot on our property and sitting in a chair and just being and just looking around, or maybe picking another spot. Another way that it happens for me is, we have horses, And the horses are a massive other way for me to find kind of like they are a conduit for me to feel connected to myself. And it's the horses themselves, but it's also the activity of engaging with the horses and taking care of the horses for me that does that. So like, in the winter here in Montana, when it's 29 below, 30 below, I still have to go out and feed the horses. And I know that if I didn't have horses, my butt wouldn't be getting out there. It just wouldn't. I'd be like, I'll just stay inside. But it's like in going out and just doing the routine thing, I often have some of the most amazing experiences in nature, even when it is 29 or 30 degrees below 0 Fahrenheit, which is really, really cold. Like I have to be really bundled up. Like I've had the most amazing moments of experiences in the snow and with my horses, just like little tiny experiences and moments. And this is something that I think is really key to, I don't know, if you are at nature, if there's something about nature that you feel calling you, or maybe you've been a long time nature fan, or you're new to kind of being like, wow, I really just feel something in nature. It doesn't matter. No matter which of those camps you're in, I find that when we just allow ourselves to connect with nature and the natural world, it does something for us. And it doesn't have to be a fancy connection. In other words, I don't have to go into Glacier National Park to have an amazing experience. I don't have to go into a big, I don't have to go on a big trail ride with my horses. I don't have to go to a place that is like known as the place where I'm going to have some experience. I can literally just walk out in my yard and sit amongst some trees, or I can walk into a horse pasture and look at my horses. And I can also, do other things. Like, when I lived in California, we had not even a half an acre of property, and it was not the kind of landscape that I feel more connected to. Like it was hot and dry there, and then in the summer I would get like really windy and cold and all of that, and I always felt a little bit like I was just kind of disconnected from the place in a way. But even with that, I would find little pieces of things that just felt kind of good to me, like a conifer tree, at the end of a street that I would just walk up to and just look at. I got into the habit of going on evening walks with our dog in the neighborhood. So I was on sidewalks. I was on paved streets. I was not out in, anything remote at all. But I started to have really amazing experiences, right? Like looking at the sky, looking at the stars. I started to hear and really have a strong connection with the owls. I would hear owls, and I would start to notice that. I had an experience with a coyote, which was at first very alarming and then actually really cool as well. But my point is, I wasn't in some big fancy place. I was just in a neighborhood with a lot of concrete in the San Francisco Bay Area, in the East Bay, in a pretty populated area. But I found a connection to nature that did these things that I've been talking about on this show. We also, had things like originally the house that we had, we originally rented and then we bought it and in California. And in the beginning, it just had like all this ground bark all over the whole yard. There was, there was like nothing, like no nature. There was like a fence. And then we had this amazing experience where my husband discovered that this area behind the fence that we thought was part of an easement was actually, it was after we bought the property. I think it was after we bought the property. We discovered that this area behind the fence was actually part of our property. And it was all like wild. There was this like cherry tree back there that was really old that almost looked like it was dying. There was an orange tree to the front, but that was actually within the yard. It was one of the only plants, but it was really kind of overgrown and just kind of, struggling. But then there were these other kind of trees and plants in this what we thought was an easement, and then we realized it was our property. And what we ended up doing is we took down the fence, and in doing so, my husband, we discovered this really cool pear tree. My husband also kind of went to the cherry tree and like kind of followed his own intuition. He has like a really good sense. He's not an arborist, but he, kind of looked up some things online about how to trim the branches of a tree in a way that serves the tree. And he kind of followed his own knowing about what the tree needed. And that tree started literally blossoming. It went from like seeming like it was just going to fall over at any second to like thriving. So much that when we went to sell the house and move, even though I was ready to leave California and ready for new experiences and new places, I really, really felt sad about that tree. Like I felt like that tree and there was like a connection of my heart with that tree in particular. And, it really was strong. And my point, and the orange tree, my husband did the same thing. He did this pruning on the orange tree, and then it just started producing all these oranges. We had oh my gosh, we had so many oranges, and they were so good that it was just amazing. And this just came from us kind of tuning into and being open to just these things that were right there in front of us that we kind of didn't see initially, and they didn't seem very fancy, and they didn't seem very, like what we would really like, but they turned into these amazing things. And this is kind of my point that I'm sharing, is that to me, what I've talked about in this podcast, these experiences we can have in nature, they don't have to come from the fanciest experiences. We don't have to have perfect gear and go out on the hike to a perfect spot. We don't have to we can go on a hike to a spot that we like. We can go to a national park and have a great experience. I'm not saying that you can't do that, but I find that for me, so much of these amazingly kind of magical experiences in nature, where nature gives me so much of exactly what I truly want in that moment, it comes from just the simplest ways of connecting with nature. You know, we had these plants in California, these these bushes. I didn't even think anything of them. They were on the one side of the fence before we took the fence down. But I started to I don't know, sit by those bushes that seemed kind of like nothing I would like. But I started to sit by them and I started to just see that the birds would go in them and there would be hummingbirds and bees. And I started to see just how pretty they were. And I started to really just love them. And they just seemed almost like nothing for so long. Like nothing that anyone would think was anything spectacular, but yet they really were really helpful. And just sitting and being with them was really beneficial in the ways like I've been talking about in this podcast, and I will continue to talk about. To me, nature and natural things, they don't have to be some big thing. They don't have to be the best thing or in some perfect thing. I think that nature and the natural world, natural elements, are really just there for us. And when we begin to allow ourselves to connect with any element of them, no matter where we are, whether we happen to live in our ideal place in nature and we have access to it on our property or nearby and we get to go there and we enjoy it, or maybe we're a nature lover and we live in a place that feels very devoid of nature, there always is nature around. The sky, the wind, the trees, birds, a plant, a flower. For a while, because I love mountains so much and I wasn't living in the mountains, and when I wasn't in the mountains, I was just longing for the mountains. And I would find that just taking time and, maybe looking at pictures of a mountain and just kind of tuning into what I liked about it also helped me. It also helped me just feel more okay in that moment, or feel kind of like I was saying, whatever it is that thing at that moment that just is right for me. And this isn't all also things, like you're feeling bad, so you want to feel good, so you go into nature. No, I go into nature also as a practice. If I'm feeling really good, going into nature and connecting with nature at those moments, oh man, it's like everything even gets more amplified better. I start to experience things and see things. Maybe I have a connection with birds or wildlife or the plants or the sunlight or the wind or whatever. And it's like it's like going from feeling good or great to feeling that times 1,000. And such is the power of nature and the natural world. I personally find this also with our animals. We have a lot of animals here. We have wildlife, which I love, 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 love our wildlife on our property. But I'm talking about our more what I would call domesticated animals. We have cats, a lot of them. We have dogs. We have chickens now. This is our first year of having chickens. Got them as little chicks, and now they're adult chickens laying eggs. So there's all kinds of first-time experiences with that. I have 2 pet mice. My one son has a lizard. And then, of course, we have the horses. And am I forgetting anybody? I think I'm not forgetting anybody. Sometimes I have to laugh at how many animals we have. But for me, just if you have a cat, I can't tell you how many times just stopping and sitting and having my cat in my lap and just letting myself just slow down and breathe and just kind of connecting with my cat. Like, I love petting my cat and just feeling their fur and, I don't know, when I scratch my cat's ears or whatever their favorite spots are and they purr, it just feels like such a reciprocation, of an experience of just really feeling good. And it's an experience that has really helped me many times. If, let's say I can't go outside or I'm not connecting in, with the other parts of the natural world, in certain ways, or even if I could, I just love connecting with my cats or my dog, or, any of our dogs or our chickens, even the lizard. I mean, I always thought the lizard was kind of cool, but now that we have one, he's just a really cool guy. And I've really learned to just kind of appreciate his lizard ways. But it's another thing, again, these things don't have to be fancy. They don't have to be complicated. What I find is that when we connect in with nature and with the natural world, natural elements, it does something for us. I think I've talked on this show, I can't remember, about some of the things I have on my window ledge. I have a sign that says the mountains are my happy place. I have some paintings that I have done. I have a piece of birch, like bark, the outer bark from a tree. I call it the skin, but I don't know if that's right. I have this like piece of a log, piece of wood that like a woodpecker must have gone crazy in, and there were bugs in it too, that just is really beautiful to me. And I also just look at them, you know. I like wolves. I've always been connected to wolves, and I have a postcard of a wolf. I have a painting of a wolf that someone has done that I really love. I have my paintings around me, which I created because I'm inspired by art and nature, and they remind me of my connection with nature. I have photographs of, like, I have a big photograph of a horse. It's not my horse, it's somebody else's horse, but it really speaks to me. And all of these things are things that help me tune into the power of nature without having to do anything fancy or complicated or perfect or get anything just right. Because I find that when I just let myself feel my connection to nature, or just bring my attention, is kind of more how I do it. Bring my attention to nature and what I like about it, that connection happens. And I start to feel better in some way, or I start to feel something that just is right for me in that moment. And this has happened for me time and time and time again. And I don't have to go to Glacier National Park to do it, or any other place. I can do it anytime, any place, in any moment. And I suspect if you're listening to this, maybe you get what I'm talking about, because you can do the same. There is nothing that I'm doing that is any different than what anybody else can do. I just have made a practice of it. And made a choice. So that's what I wanted to talk about for today's episode, and I will end on that note. Thanks for tuning in to today's episode of the Power of Nature podcast. To learn more about me and my other offerings, you can visit my website at michellewaldo.com. That's MICHELLEWALDO.com.